Hi guys, and welcome to our Easter webinar. I think it's awesome that you're here. I will wait a little bit for everybody to settle in and get a nice drink or whatever. And then we'll start. And we have a lot to talk about because this is a really, really awesome topic. And there are so many things to say. But I am giving you a preview of the slides, and I didn't want to, so this is slide number 1. I would love to know where you're from and if you have a rescue dog or not, or if you're completely new to dogs, or if you're a professional. Whatever you want to share, I would love to know. And yeah, where you're from, that would be awesome as well. So, and with that, I want to also tell you a little bit about housekeeping now before we start. So you can ask questions whenever you would like. We are not that many, I think. If I overlook something, just tell me in the end again, or I will open windows for questions and we'll answer anything I can. And if I can't, I will look it up and answer you in an email or whatever. I will tell you though. So, okay. Found you recently and love your content. Thank you. Awesome. So what kind of dog do you have? I would love to know. I'm very curious. I will tell you about my dog, my current dog, as well. All right. So let's just dive in and see who will join us as well. First of all, I'm Anita. I hope it's okay if we're on a first name basis because that's just how I usually work with my people. I created Brave Dog Training online. English is not my native language. I'm Austrian, so I speak German. And that's how my dog training journey started in German. But the Empath's Way is the English version. Brave Dog Training Online is the English version, and I hope you excuse some language mistakes if there are any. All right. Just a short intro. This is Sammy and me. And in the beginning, we were not that close. We were not like lovey-dovey and everything's perfect and the way we are now. It was a challenge. He was 2 weeks in my home and I wanted to give up. To be honest, it was really, really hard. He was good for about a few days, and when we hit the 2-week mark, and it's often 2 or 3 weeks, it's really, really starting to change. And the same thing happened to Sammy. So we had him for 2 weeks. We lived in a city, and we discovered that whatever the internet said about, well, a Sheltie needs 3 hours of walking every day and stuff like that, we did all that. We tried everything, or we thought we did. We actually didn't. But nothing worked. He got crazier and crazier and crazier. So 2 weeks in, and I was at my first trainer's appointment, and I was done. I wanted to give up. I was absolutely sure that I was not the right person for this dog. Turns out he was the perfect dog for me. And I think I'm doing a pretty good job now with him. So yes, he had resource guarding issues. He didn't want to get touched. He did not give any warnings. So he immediately went to use his teeth, and he would go crazy whenever we see another dog, or would get really panicked when we saw kids, and we lived next to a school, so you get the whole picture, right? It was a challenge. But what he did for me was he got me into learning. So whenever our first trainer introduced me to nice training and introduced me to what was actually possible with dogs in general and him in particular, I just got the bug. I never stopped learning. I'm a real nerd. So I'm giving you a little sneak peek of what we can have with our dogs, what there is to learn, and where we can get more. So yes, I did a little bit of shelter work, and I do work with rescues to this day. So I am a trainer since 2018, and I created a nonprofit organization that helps with training Molosses and bully breeds. So maybe we have other rescue organizations who would like to get a training council. We do that for free for other animal rescue organizations. And of course, I've been a foster mom. So whenever there was a tricky dog who just could not be normally fostered, I would jump in. And yeah, it's been 9 dogs so far, including Sammy. And they were all very special in their effects and in their behavior. All right. Jill says, we have a Japanese Chin, 5 years, 4 years old, and just rescued a puppy. Aww. It looks like a Belgian Shepherd. No idea what else it could be. Yeah, that's kind of the interesting part, right? We don't 100% know what's in there, but we see behaviors and we see, it could be that. That's really interesting. All right, so we are all the same. We're talking about fear and aggression, and sometimes those are kind of taboo topics. They are not talked about that openly, and sometimes we immediately jump to there is something broken or wrong with a dog that feels fear or shows aggression. But honestly, we all do. It's totally normal. And yes, we will talk about what's not normal. Stick with me and I will tell you how you can fix it. But just being afraid, I mean, who amongst us has never been afraid, right? If I put a spider on the screen, how many of you will just shut it, right? This is something that is normal. And it's also normal to show aggression sometimes, right? Especially when we're stressed. Like if we have a stressful day and we're driving and somebody cuts in or whatever, honks at us, we react maybe with a finger, or maybe we start a rant in the car. And that's aggression. Or if somebody wants to take something from us, we might say, hey, that's mine. Or we might get a little bit more annoyed or whatever. So yes, we can do aggression as well. And sometimes we get triggered, right? Sometimes, and before we know what we're doing, we're typing some kind of comment into Facebook because something somebody says triggered us and we had some emotional reaction and we're typing, and afterward we're thinking, what the hell did I just do? Or we even regret what we said. Or it was a complete misunderstanding, but we had some kind of trigger moment and we reacted with aggression. And yes, sometimes it happens in relationships, right? And very often that are misunderstandings as well. But that happens. So no, love is no antidote for aggression. We can love somebody very, very intensely and still get sometimes aggressive. So yes, when you have a good relationship, we might resolve some issues. So we might not react that intensely, and we can train our dogs to trust us and stuff like that. But what I want to encourage you to think of is that even though a dog shows aggression, and sometimes we get afraid of our dogs because they are unpredictable or they show teeth very often or whatever, it doesn't mean that the dog doesn't love you. It just means that the situation is an issue. All right? So I'll check the chat again. I didn't realize how afraid I've been with the shepherd puppy. Yes, we get really afraid with our dogs as well, and not very rarely because we want to do everything right? And there are situations that surprise us, and yeah. Still, we can overcome that, as well as our dogs. So let's see how the not so normal stuff happens, right? What's the difference between a rescue dog and a breeder? First of all, for the sake of this presentation, I am referring to breeder when we are talking about somebody who takes an extreme interest in early socialization. So they put a lot of effort and a lot of time into socializing the puppies. Maybe you have seen such puppy areas online somewhere on Facebook or Google or whatever, where the puppies have different balance obstacles and play around between balls and things that make sounds and all these objects. That's what I mean. And also, the puppies live in the house, so they know household appliances, and they know people and horses and other animals and car rides and whatever. So they just learn a lot. That's a breeder for the sake of this presentation. And same thing for rescues who maybe have a foster mom who does all these things. I would put those into the breeder category as well because the upbringing is very similar. On the rescue side are typical rescue dogs, so dogs that have been found somewhere as a puppy or have been rescued from the streets somewhere where it's dangerous, or they have been rescued from puppy mills or whatever. And the same things that apply to them also apply to puppies from pet shops, backyard breeders, farms, and puppy mills. Now, I know those are a little bit different, but you will see it's very, very similar. So, if we have a breeder who puts a lot of effort into creating those puppies, they usually check what genetics the mom and dad have and how they can provide as much early exposure as possible. And it starts even in the womb. Like, they can do prenatal stuff and such things. Like, there are a gazillion programs, I think. I know puppy culture, and those things are really awesome. So, yes, there are rescues who do them as well. With those, we still have the genetics part, because very often we don't know the genetics or they have not been checked. And it can go either way, right? It can be really good or really bad or somewhere in the middle. If we have a puppy who doesn't know anything and has bad genetics, we get fear and aggression more easily. And of course, we can get health issues, and we will get into that a little bit later, but health issues are one of the main reasons why aggression happens, all right? So, yes, early learning, early socialization, having very many different stimuli, like things that touch the paws, and the puppies get held in different positions to just trigger the brain and trigger learning. They are handled carefully with a very good breeder or a foster mom. And on the other hand, we have puppies that are not exposed to anything. We have parents that are afraid or aggressive or both. We have dogs that live without outside stimuli whatsoever. So there is really nothing they learn. There is nothing they deal with. So they don't know how to deal with it, right? And if you have never seen anything in your life except maybe a horse box or whatever, how are you supposed to deal with cars and people and kids and strollers and bikes and other dogs and cats and what have you? That's really hard. So, yes, it's important what they learn as puppies. And of course, if there are other dogs around, how are they behaving? How are they socialized? Are they friendly? Like if you have guests over and the dogs greet the guests friendly and very polite and have really no issues with guests. It translates to what the puppies do. And the puppies learn, right? They watch their parents and other dogs that live in the household and they adapt that. So they start doing the same thing or they start feeling the same way. And that's when sometimes puppies already learn that maybe guests are dangerous because mom acts like guests are dangerous. And to counteract that is sometimes a lot more difficult than a puppy who has learned guests are fine. And of course, something that happens to every puppy is that they get separated. So there is something in the life of every puppy that is more or less traumatic. It kind of depends on the puppy and how well they are socialized and how hard it is for them because of their personality. But there is a separation. They are separated from mom, from the siblings, from the humans they have known their whole life, right? Because they're moving to a new home and into a new family. And this is all very exciting and can be scary. And the more they have learned in the first few weeks, the less scary the new things are. Because let's imagine if you have learned that apartments are safe. You feel safe in an apartment. You feel safe walking on tiles. You feel safe walking on wooden floors. You feel safe walking on carpets and on grass and on concrete. And you know that every person you have met so far was very friendly to you. And every animal you met was very soft and kind of cute. Now, if you would jump on a plane, fly to a different country, get picked up by somebody who is friendly to you, and takes you to an apartment where you have tile floor and there is a dog, you might not be scared. Yes, it's gonna be exciting because you're in a new country and hopefully you know the language or at least can talk to somebody like the person who picked you up. But if you lived somewhere where you had only grass, you were living in a tent, say we're living in a tent, all right? And you have seen the tent and grass. You have never met another person. You have never met an animal. You have never walked on any other surface than grass. How would you feel if the same thing happens? You get on a plane and you get picked up by somebody you have never seen in your life and you have never seen another person in your life. You have no idea how people are, and if what this person is doing is friendly or not. You cannot read that person because you have no experience. And then you come into an apartment, concrete walls, new floors you have never walked on, and it feels weird, it's different. And then some kind of creature comes towards you. Now, that is scary. And that's the difference. That's why early socialization is so important. All right. And of course, all the experiences the puppies make in their first few weeks, or even longer, depending on when we are adopting our dog, they can be positive and negative, right? There can be no experiences, or there can be positive ones or negative ones. Everything that is negative, again, influences what's scaring the dog, right? You have made negative experiences with a car driving very close to your car because you had an accident. You will react fearful whenever a car drives up close. Same thing happens to your dogs. Stress levels. Stress levels can lead to more, or getting scared more easily, or also getting aggressive more easily. And the stress level doesn't start with the puppy. The stress level starts with the mom. So the puppies in the womb get the stress levels of the mom. So we really have to see how the mom's doing as well. And sometimes in rescue, we cannot really make that much of a difference for the mom, because we get the mom and the mom is already terrified of us. So yes, we might do the best we can to get her fear levels down before she gives birth, but she will be stressed and the puppies will be stressed as well. And that, again, influences how they cope with life. Experiences like multiple homes can be very traumatic for dogs. So if they have lived somewhere and then the next family adopted them, and then they were at a shelter, and then the next family adopted them and brought them back, and all those things. It's always something new, and it's always the separation, always a little trauma. And again, that can lead to future issues. It doesn't have to, but it can. Getting caught is a huge thing. So my little girl probably was caught with a sling. Otherwise, I cannot explain why she's behaving that way. Whenever she had something on her, she would freeze. And we got her into a harness pretty quickly. She's wearing the harness with no issues. But as soon as she has something around her neck, she is like a statue. She cannot move. She is absolutely terrified. And that can happen when they are caught with a pole or they are caught with some kind of sling or whatever. Injuries, long transports, and different humans and their handling can be an issue as well, especially when we have humans that are a little bit rough or not as friendly and things like that. And another big one in rescue, and I think that is something that is overlooked a lot, the influence of castration. So getting spayed or neutered. I know why the rescue organizations do that, and it's different in different countries. And yes, if you have many strays running around, it makes sense. But what we shouldn't forget is that a castration removes a lot of the sex hormones. Not all, but a very big portion of them. And sex hormones, especially testosterone, work against fear. Testosterone makes brave. It makes, a little bit cocky even. And if you remove that, the underlying fear that has been there before as well, but it didn't show, might show. And again, if the dogs are castrated very early, it stops the brain development. because sex hormones are really important for brain development. That's why the trend is to wait longer or even not castrate an animal. It depends, again, where they live and on the personality and all those things. But it has to be a decision that is made for one animal and not generalized over all of them, because this is just very individual, right? And we're back at health. Health is a huge thing. If we have health issues, and that's why we often see aggression in senior dogs who have never been aggressive before, or even fear, like they are sensitive to sounds suddenly, it might have to do with pain. So they can have back pain or some kind of stomach issue or whatever. For Sammy, he got more sound sensitive when his pancreas stopped working. He also was more sound sensitive when or before we had a sufficient medication for his thyroid. So he has a thyroid that's not working as it should. And before we found that out, he was more easily triggered, he was more fearful, and he was more aggressive. And of course, every other pain, everything that's wrong in the body can lead to behavior issues. And some things are really hard to figure out, like headaches. Yes, dogs can get headaches, they have heads. And there are nerves in there, so they can get headaches, but it's really tricky to figure out if a dog has a headache. So yes, that might take a while. And if you ever get the feeling that there is something wrong with your dog physically, like your dog suddenly doesn't want to walk stairs anymore, or he doesn't want to jump on a couch anymore, or he doesn't want to get touched while he liked it before, or even if he didn't, those are all things that can point to a medical issue, and that needs checking out by a vet, of course. And sometimes we trainers see things because we just see a lot of dogs and we see what normal looks like. We don't see it in our own dogs because we're too close to them, but the outside view is often a little bit easier. All right? Now, let's look at some pictures. I want to get your brains going. First of all, if you have any questions, now would be a good moment. And you can also tell me in the chat if you see signs of fear in the picture. Yeah, I do wish that too. But we're getting there. Anybody brave enough to look for cues? Yep, exactly. Tail and ears are down. Yeah, the ears are actually pricked forward. But you're right, they're not in the natural in the natural position. And that's because he sees another dog. And for him, he usually has a tail that is like curled like this. And that's our Willow on our walk, unfortunately. Yeah, that is unfortunately a fear display for this dog. Every dog looks different. So for some dogs, a tail that is low is completely normal. Like racing dogs, greyhound types, they usually have a very low tail, right? Border collies might have a low tail, and that's completely normal for that dog, and that doesn't mean fear. But for this dog, it means fear. And also you can see in the eyes you have, or below the eyes, you have wrinkles down here. The mouth is also very tense, and you have the wrinkles on the forehead. It's a little tricky to see in a picture. It's just, I know the dog. That's why it's easy for me. But we can look at the next one. And that is a little bulldog. And it's tricky to see signs with short-snouted dogs and dogs who have a lot of folds, because the face is just not as easy to read as a normal dog's. But there is one thing that we can see, and that can give us a cue. We don't have too many brave people in the chat, but I will just tell you. So, the most obvious thing with this dog is that we have the white in the eyes. So the eyes are open very, very wide, and that's, yes, exactly, wide-eyed. That's how we see the white. That's, yes, we can see some wrinkles on the forehead, but the most obvious thing are the eyes. Same goes for this one. Now, with this one, we also have the white in the eyes, but also we have a very flat forehead. And that happens when the eyes, the ears go back. When the ears go back as far as they would, you have a very flat forehead. And that's also a sign of uncomfortable and fearful feelings. Same goes for this little guy. We have very huge eyes, but this is a really good example of every dog looks different. Small dogs, especially the ones with the very round skulls, often have bulging eyes. And it's a little tricky to see if they have just widened the eyes a lot or if it's just a regular look. But with this little guy, we have a very flat forehead, and we don't even see ears because they are all the way back. And also, if you have dealt with a lot of small dogs, you'll see that he does this. So he pulls the head back. That's also a backwards movement, and everything that is a backwards movement is a sign for fear. It can just be that it smells interesting back there, so I will walk back there. But usually if they look at something and they lean back or they walk backwards, it's a sign of discomfort or fear. The next one is this little fella. And yes, sometimes it's really hard to see something on a dog who wears a muzzle. If you want to try it. There are some things you can see. And just as a side note, that muzzle is a lot too small. So if you want to pick out a muzzle for your dog, use a metal one, not those plastic ones, because they are just, the form is just not right. And this one is way too small. So the dog would have to have a lot more space so he can open the mouth freely. But that's not the issue for that dog, I'm guessing. give you another minute if you want to try. Okay. Let's start with the muscle tension. It's a little tricky because you don't see the dog from the side, but you see that this one paw, the one hind leg that is on our side, is... I was just asking if you can see any signs of fear in the dog. Where was it? Yeah, right. You can see that the one paw is ready to run away, or at least ready to stand up again. The legs are very close to the body, so this is not relaxed, even though he's lying on a hip. You can see that the legs are kind of pulled toward the belly. That's the trickier part to see. The more easy part is, again, that we have a very wrinkle-free forehead. The ears are back a lot. And also, the eyebrows are a little bit... Yeah, he looks terrified. Exactly. He pulls the eyebrows toward each other. And of course, we have the white in the eyes. So, yes, this dog does show fear. Now, what's fear? Fear, and I will drop a little knowledge bomb that has been bugging me for years in a moment. Fear per se is a physical reaction. It's an emotion. We all have it. It's natural. It's very important. Otherwise, we would be dead, right? And it can happen because there is a trigger. Like, if the spider walks in front of your screen right now and you're afraid of spiders, you might get a startled reaction, right? For the dogs, it might be a kid, it might be a car, it might be a sound, it might be a smell. That's where we have the most issues because we cannot smell whatever they do. And for Sammy, it is smell of wildlife. That took me some time to get out. And it can also happen without a trigger, or at least without a trigger we notice, right? We don't necessarily know if there is no trigger or if it's just a trigger that we don't notice. But it is possible to be afraid just because you're anticipating something dangerous. So you're kind of expecting something to happen even though it doesn't happen. The fear of the fear. That's possible, and it happens because fear generalizes super easily. So, like, if we have a dog-on-dog fear situation, your dog's afraid of other dogs because something happened, right? You had one bad experience with a blonde Labrador. And that's Sammy again. One bad experience with a blonde Labrador. Now, every blonde Labrador is an issue. But before we even realize what's going on, it's not just Labradors. It's every blonde dog, every blonde big dog. And then it's every blonde dog, even small ones. And then it's every dog. And then it's objects that look like dogs, like trolleys and stuff. And then it's the humans, because they're close to the dog. And then it's the area, because that's the area where it happened and it could happen again. And then we are at a point where everything's scary and we didn't even realize it happening. And it all started with one dog and one experience. That's the tricky part of fear. Now, and there is the thing that's been bugging me. We have the emotion on one hand, and then we have the behavior. We cannot, with whatever we do, increase the fear, so the emotion, especially not with nice things. So you can offer your dog the most juicy steak you can find on the planet. If he's scared, he will never be more scared because of it. Never, ever. It cannot happen. The behavior we can influence. And yes, for example, if we have a dog who is afraid of another dog, like we are walking on a leash and there comes another dog and our dog shows some fear, and we have learned that we are supposed to correct the dog and we yank on the leash. Yes, we can increase the fear, because now the dog doesn't only predict the fear itself, it also predicts pain. And that makes it worse. But if we talk to the dog, oh, good dog, everything's fine, nothing will happen. We will not increase the fear. That also goes for fireworks and stuff like that. So if your dog is hiding, let the dog hide and hide with him. All right? Yes, that's too easy, but I just wanted to get that out. And even though we can influence the behavior, if we do nice training, we will not get a fear response from the dog, because the dog doesn't want to feel afraid. It's not happening. No living creature likes being scared. So they will not choose to act scared only because we wave a treat in front of them. Okay? Alright, we have Willow loves big, burly, bearded men and is terrified of little girls. That's inconvenient. No, it's something else. Usually it's the other way around, right? But kids are often really scary for dogs. They act differently, they are often louder, and with little girls they are also high-pitched, and that might be scary. Alright, so yes, if our dogs are afraid, they have 5 options of reacting. One is flight, so they can run away. Most of the time they can't, because they are somehow trapped in a house kind of environment, or they are on a leash, or they are just in a car. They're just in somewhere, or they are trapped somehow, so they cannot flee. And very often we don't realize that our dogs are scared and need to walk away, so we don't go with them. And if you see your dog being scared and wants to walk away, walk away. The next option is freeze. Those are dogs that we can see at the vets very often. So vets often love these dogs because they're really good dogs. They don't try to bite, they don't move, they don't do anything, they are frozen. But that's not because they are comfortable, that's because they are frozen in fear. And we can also see that happening when we try to groom our dogs or do some handling or whatever. And even if we're walking towards something that's scary and they become slower and slower and slower and slower, that's a sign for us. They can fiddle around, so they can just be goofy, and something very obvious of that is something that looks like play, but it isn't. And very often stressed but friendly dogs choose this option, and that's when we see zoomies. No, it doesn't mean that every dog who zooms out is in some kind of trouble, but it tells us the stress level is too high at that moment. Usually dogs who are afraid don't fiddle. That's more like a discomfort and I don't know what I'm doing kind of thing. Option number 4 is faint, and that is really the horrible option. It often happens with training techniques, And it just means the dog shuts down completely. The dog does not feel safe to behave at all. So they do the bare minimum, like breathing and walking if the humans tells them to. Otherwise, nothing. And to get a dog out of that is really, really, really hard. So I would take any other of the four, even the last, and that's aggression, before I take faint, because getting that back it's hard. And of course, the last one is fight, so aggression. The dog does not walk away, but go forward and tries to scare away whatever is scaring the dog, all right? So, we will get into aggression shortly, and I will tell you why the dog is actually acting that way. But for many dogs, fight is the last result. But there are dogs, and yes, some breeds are bred that way, so they start earlier. Some dogs just start with fight. They don't try to fiddle and they don't try to run away because either they have learned it doesn't work or it's just how they are. All right? And yes, that's tricky, but we can do something about it. That's a good thing. So, if we want our dogs to stop being afraid and we want to get them to a place where they are confident and they can cope with their life, what we should not do is leave our dogs hanging. So just trying to get the dog used to something. That happens a lot, especially in rescue work, where the dogs are just taken somewhere and then people stay with the dogs in a scary situation because they hope for the dog to get used to the situation, and that doesn't happen. What can happen is that the dog shuts down and we're in faint again. That's what we don't want. What we want is the dog to actually deal with the situation. And for that, we cannot trigger the fear, or at least not to a point where the dog cannot act anymore. Also, we should never prevent flight. Yes, we should secure our dogs, so we have leashes and stuff, and I'm a big fan of leashes. So don't let your dog free roam anywhere and just let them run away. Of course not. But if you see your dog trying to avoid a situation, walk a little bit further away and see if your dog is able to approach again, or at least look at the thing, or in some way do any training from a little bit further away. Of course, that also goes for hiding spots. Do not prevent your dog from hiding somewhere. I have seen that a lot here. It's been done, I don't know why, but it's been done. That, like, if the dog is hiding under the bed, that people build some kind of construction around the bed so the dog cannot hide under it anymore. But again, that puts the dog in a situation that is even more uncomfortable, and it takes the safety away that the dog needs to learn to be able to cope with the situation. So leave that open. Of course, you can reassure, love, and support your dog as much as you like. Again, you cannot increase the fear with it. And we should never use intimidation or corrections. You cannot correct the dog out of being afraid. It's not possible. You can worsen the fear, or you can make your dog feel even worse. But you cannot make it go away. Right. What we can do instead of all the things we shouldn't is carefully desensitize and positively connect the scary things. So, for example, if we have a dog who is scared of men or people in general, We can use parking spots or parking lots, parking areas where people are doing their own thing and they don't mind the dog running around. And we pick a spot that is furthest away from the people. And then we see how close we can go with our dog. And our dog is still able to work with us, take treats or other rewards, look at us, whatever the dog already knows. And we see how we can get closer, move away, get closer, move away. Do little games. And desensitization would be a process where we get the dog used to something without giving any treats or anything. But that would mean that the dog cannot be in any kind of fear mode. That's what we're doing when we're doing home alone training. Like, we make the steps so small that we never trigger the fear. We never trigger the panic response. And that's how the dog gets used to stuff. The best combination for most things is both, because we can go a little quicker with the counter conditioning, so the connection with positive emotions, and still the desensitization is in there all the time. And we can also help our dogs build confidence overall, and not just in a situation that's scary, but in the whole life, right? In day-to-day reality. And that means our dogs get to make little decisions, like, do you want this chew toy or this chew toy? Do you want to go left or right? And very often, if our dogs don't want to walk a certain path, it's because of some kind of reason. Maybe there's a smell we don't get, or maybe he hears some kind of barking or whatever. So we can listen to our dogs. And yes, sometimes we have to kind of rescue them from themselves because they are too young to make good decisions. And that's where we have to set them up for success. But whatever is possible, we can offer to them. We can also teach them to say no. And that's where cooperative care and medical training comes in. Like, if we have a dog who is afraid of getting brushed and bites all the time, whenever we get the brush out, we have teeth. Again, Sammy was exactly like that. It was really funny with him. All right. That's when we can just introduce a cooperation signal, like putting the chin somewhere. And whenever the chin is on that piece of cloth or whatever, we are allowed to do the brushing. And when the chin goes up, the brushing stops. So the dog has a new way of telling us that this is not okay. He doesn't have to bite anymore. Awesome, right? All right, we can also do body awareness exercises and little success games. Those help with overall confidence, right? If you feel your body and you know what your body can do, you get more confident. It's the same thing with us and the same thing with our dogs. And very many dogs don't really know where they end. It's funny. They can move their front legs perfectly, but if you ask them to move the hind legs, it gets tricky. And we can improve that with little games like walking slalom between some kind of, I don't know, pillows or whatever, or walking over a pillow. And balance things and all these awesome games. And for success, all of these things are success. And I love sniffing games. I love everything sniffing. It's super easy for the dog to get success. And it's just fun. It's what a dog is supposed to do, right? It's completely natural. And we can let them search out everything. They can smell just everything. So those are fun. All right, who sees fear in this dog? I'm curious. Okay, I can see a question. I can see we have a lot of work to do with Willow. She just doesn't seem interested in much. Yes, some dogs are so trapped in their fear that they are not ready for much. But what you could try to do is, and we did that with a 15-year-old girl who lived in a crate for most of her life. She never saw anything except a shelter. She was 15 years old, and we started to do little packages for her. So you can just use some old cardboard boxes or the insides of toilet paper rolls, fold it up, put treats in, give it to her, and just let her figure it out. You don't even have to be in the same room if that's scary for her. Be sure that she doesn't eat the cardboard thingies. That wouldn't be very healthy. But as long as she doesn't, that might be an easy way to start. Or even sniffing carpets or snuffle mats. Those are pretty easy to do as well, and it gets them into using the brain a little bit differently. They cannot sniff and be afraid at the same time. Either one. Alright, yes, leaning back rather than forward. That is awesome. Most people miss that because of the face. Because the face, yes, it's scary. The face is offensive aggression. There is offensive and defensive, and the body is defensive, so back, but the face is forward. Everything in the face is forward. The ears, the little lines on the forehead happens when the ears are forward. The eyes are very hard. You can have soft eyes and hard eyes. Same thing for dogs. You have the wrinkles on the nose that happens when they just lift up the front lip. You cannot see all the teeth. When you have a defensively aggressive dog, you can see all the teeth. With an offensively aggressive dog, you can only see the front teeth. Now, it doesn't mean that this dog will bite more easily than a defensively aggressive dog. It just means that this dog is sure that with this display, he can make people go away. And that happens when aggression is shown more often because it works. And that's when they get more confident in their behavior, and that's when we see offensively aggressive dogs. But before we see the aggression, we see a dog move up a ladder. And I like this one. I again forgot the source. It's, I think, Shepherd. I think it's Shepherd. Yeah. And this ladder of aggression shows really well what the dogs show us before they bite. So they start with being really friendly and in a green area. They are displaying no stress, no fear, nor aggression, nor anything. Then they start with calming signals. So they try to tell us politely that things are getting uncomfortable. So they lick their lips, they look away, they turn their body away, they avert their eyes, they lift a paw, they go do something else, they go sniffing, and then we can see the stress level rise, and the things the dog does become more weird and out of context. They start biting the leash, they start jumping around, they start digging, they start running. And when that doesn't work, we are in a fiddle area right now. If that doesn't work, they try to tell us more openly that things are becoming uncomfortable. That's when we can hear growling, that's when we can see snarling, and the eyes become a little bit harder, right? And if that doesn't work, We can see snapping, so the dog ear snaps in the direction of whatever's scaring him or whatever's threatening him. And if that doesn't work, the bites become more severe, more severe, more severe. So, as soon as we see any of these signs, we should really intervene and try to make the situation more easy for the dog. And yes, if the dog tries to do these things repeatedly and they don't work, the dog will skip steps. Way around. So there are dogs who no longer bother with anything but biting because they have learned it doesn't work anyway. Humans don't listen to me. So biting works, that's what I'll do. And for Sammy, it was actually snapping. So he would skip everything until snapping. And that's what he did. And it's tricky. A dog who doesn't give any warnings is tricky. So, yes, we talked about genetic lines and breeds. There is a component, but again, the upbringing is more important, or at least as important. So, yes, we can have a dog who would, with the breed, he is going to aggression more easily. But if the socialization is really done very well and thoroughly, and we have made good experiences and stuff like that, the dog will never need the aggression, maybe. The most common issue that is underlying any aggression is fear. Most aggression happens because the dog is afraid. Calming signals might have been ignored or just not seen, and growling might have been forbidden. Now, and that's the tricky part for us. If our dog growls at us, never forbid that. Never scold your dog for growling. This is kind of the last warning, and it's the last thing we can see that tells us this situation is no longer okay. We need to change something now. And as long as the dog's still communicating, he's not yet biting. It's a good thing, right? And of course, if there is pressure built up in the dog constantly, like if the dog is constantly supposed to do something that he can't, or constantly overwhelmed, or constantly just restricted too much, pressure builds up. And venting, so letting it out, feels good. But getting into the aggression does not feel good. So it's a little bit tricky. Yes, dogs can learn that aggression feels good because the pressure is gone and the thing that's pressuring them, so most of the time other humans, are gone as well. That's why it works. That's why they keep doing it. The hardest part is remaining calm yourself. Yes, that's definitely true. That's something we have to train ourselves, and it's tricky. All right. So, what we cannot do when we deal with an aggressive dog is use corrections. Yes, I know. We are on YouTube, and most of the YouTube channels tell you otherwise, but that backfires. Just either we get a dog who falls into faint, so it just shuts down and that's it. That's no quality of life for the dog, and it actually isn't fun for us having a dog like that, right? We want to be with our dogs and socialize with our dogs and have fun. But a dog who is shut down will not have fun. So, yes, that's no way to go. But what happens, at least as often as the dog shutting down, is that the corrections backfire and the aggression gets worse. Because we are making the dog feel worse with the corrections. And that's why they act more aggressive. It doesn't necessarily have to happen immediately. So maybe you just impress the dog a lot with yanking on a leash on a prong collar or whatever. And the dog got so startled that he will stop barking at the other dog for a moment. Maybe even longer. Maybe a week, maybe 2, maybe even a year. But since we don't have the barking anymore, we might not see that the dog is still uncomfortable. And every dog has some kind of threshold. So maybe he can contain himself for a year. But enough is enough, and that's when the dog explodes, and that's when the aggression comes back. And most of the time, worse. So that's when we have redirection, that's when we have a dog who is just completely out of his mind, and we don't want that. We talked about forbidding growling. Never do that. Don't try to establish some kind of rank or dominance or whatever. That's not how dogs work. They do not form ranks. And dominance has something to do with resources. So dominance is just aggression over resource. So resource guarding. And no, you don't have to show the dog you're the boss or you're stronger or you're whatever. The dog has more arguments that speak against you being stronger. And we don't want to fight our dogs all the time, right? We can just live with them and not kind of do some power struggle thing. That's not necessary. And also, stay away from the thought of your dog must do whatever. Because if you put too much pressure into a situation, what you get is a dog that explodes with pressure. That's when you see the aggression. So, yes, aggression is scary. And yes, aggression very often triggers in us a moment where we don't want to give in. But we really should take a step back, assess what's happening, and see how we can help the dog feel more confident and safe. Because the dog's feeling not very good in the situation. That's why he's behaving that way. So, what we can do is everything that goes for fear. Everything that helps with fear also helps with aggression. What we can also do is get more distance in. So whenever we see a dog who shows some kind of aggression, whatever, very often it happens with resources or towards other dogs or people on leash, out of the car, things like that. So if we're working on leash and we see our dogs show some kind of aggression, we know that we're too close to whatever the dog's aggressing at. If we see the dog is growling over food bowl, we know that our dog doesn't feel comfortable with us near the food bowl yet. We can start introducing those distances with connecting them with nice things like, hey, see, if I walk in some kind of distance to your food bowl, I'm adding stuff to it so you don't have to be worried about me. We can trade stuff. So, like if our dog has stolen a shoe and is guarding the shoe, we can offer the dog something way better than the shoe. And yes, we have to know what's better than the shoe. But very often we have something in the house that's better than the shoe. So we can start trading, or at least we can use some kind of lure to get the dog away from what he's guarding and then take it away safely. We might need to use management so the dog doesn't have success anymore and nothing can happen, right? We have to be safe. And depending on how dangerous the dog is, we have to use multiple management tools. I have recently worked with a dog who did not show any kind of warning whatsoever. He just snapped and would go at a human. So there was bite incidents before and the whole thing. So that dog has to be muzzled outside just because he was so quick and he did not show anything beforehand. That's when a muzzle comes in, and it's a really good thing. Baby gates can be awesome. So if you have for example, two dogs who struggle when they are getting fed, right? They are eating, but they are always eyeballing the other one. Put them behind a baby gate. So one on one side, one on the other side. Or a closed door, right? So they can eat in peace. We can use distance, we talked about that, and we can also use avoidance. So if we have a dog who would like to shred every other dog, we can start with avoiding meeting other dogs. Not forever, but for just a limited time to get the stress level down and to get the dog working with us again. And we need to learn to read body language, especially our dog's body language. And maybe the other dogs, depending on what our dog's aggressing to. And if we see our dog tensing up, we can still interrupt with a reward and with relaxation cues and whatever. So if we are early, we can catch our dog still being fine. Now, it might happen that something happens, all right? Yes, management should prevent everything, but sometimes we don't know, or sometimes we just want to have a strategy for when things go south. And the most important thing is to stay calm. Now, every dog's different, and I have not been bitten that many times, but one time I was walking a collie, a very old collie. He was blind, and I wanted to go back inside, and I walked through the door first. Again, this dog did have a history of many bite incidents. He had a history of biting, especially in the area of the belly and in the chest area, because he didn't get any higher. He would bite more than once. He would hold, he would shake, and he would not let go. That is the worst thing that a dog can do. He did not do any damage because he did not have that many teeth left. He was old, but he never had any issue with me. So I was not thinking about anything. So I walked through the door. He was behind me because I wanted to guide him with my voice through the door. It was narrow. And he had followed up behind me, and with his nose, he ran against my foot. And that somehow triggered him. I don't know if it was a flashback or whatever happened, but he bit down. He felt that and he bit down, and he held on to my foot, and he would not let go. He would just hold that foot. And I was standing there, and I would just tell him, it's okay, let go, everything's fine. And when he heard my voice, after the first, his first aggression moment, he heard my voice, and it took a few seconds, and he let go, and everything was fine again. He was completely normal again. And that is something, yes, that's really hard, that's really difficult to do. And again, he did not damage that much. It bled a little bit, but he doesn't have much of his teeth. So, right. But what you cannot do is pull on the dog, because when the dog's teeth go in, they build like a canal, right? But if you just try to pull the dog off, the skin, the muscle tissue, everything the teeth are in rips. And that's when the injuries become more severe. So try not to pull on the dog. You can try de-escalation like I did with my voice. But again, I knew the dog, right? And you can also try different things like a break stick if you have one. If you're dealing with aggressive dogs, I would recommend having that on you. You can also, if you have a leash, put the leash around the neck and choke the dog. That's, of course, nothing I would usually do, but if it's a really, really horrible situation and I know that the dog would kill whatever is in his mouth, that might be the last result, all right? But you have to get your strategy right beforehand, all right? In the situation, it's too late. You have to get your strategy ready and you have to practice, at least in your mind. After the incident, I hope it never happens. If it does, recap and learn from it. Try to figure out what happened. And of course, if you don't have any injuries, if you have injuries, treat the injuries. And most of the time, those things don't, it's not very often that a dog really inflicts terrible injuries to a human being or another dog or whatever. So if it's just a snap, try to learn from it. What happened? What was the trigger? Why did the dog react that way? And how can you prevent it in the future? All right. Now, because it's really hard alone, I know, because I've done a lot alone, and walking this path can be really lonely, right? You see all the other people out with their dogs and they don't have any issues because you don't see the people with the issues. They are walking at night. They are walking maybe not at all. You don't see them. So, yes, it can be lonely. It is really hard because you have to get all the information by yourself. And if you want to do that, check the channel. If you don't have already, subscribe to the channel. You will get a lot of info. There are other awesome colleagues on YouTube, and we all give away so much free stuff. So, yes, you can do it all by yourself. If you don't want to, you can book a free call, and the link is in the description. And we see how I can help and if my VIP training is a good fit for you. I put the best possible care in there I can provide. So you have a lot of support. You're never alone. You really get all I can give. Or you can help your dog with your own pace and get an online course that is also filled to the top with everything I did with my dogs so far. So there is confidence building, there is medical training, there is how to be polite to your dog, there is how to introduce your dog to new areas. So many different things. You got tricks and you got so much in there. And of course, you can ask me any question you want to, which you can do now as well. And yes, it's not just training. It's not just sit down heel. It's a way of life. It's the empath's way. It's just a program that gets you and your dog to another page. And yes, I can say that because it helped with my dog and with foster dogs and with my clients. And yes, I really like working this way. And yes, it works with aggression as well. So now I'm opening up again for questions. Okay, we have a few questions. I don't know how to respond when the puppy is constantly biting. Well, this is kind of a classic, right? Puppy biting is somewhat natural, but yes, it can get too much. And very often it gets too much when either the puppy is too excited. So maybe the day was a little bit much, or the week was a little bit much, or everything is a little bit much. And that's when relaxation, stress relief, chewing and licking and stuff like that comes in handy a lot. It can be teething. And again, we are at chewing and licking and frozen stuff and things like that. redirecting really early. So if you see your dog getting a little bit too excited, try to redirect early. Or do some sniffing games so the brain can calm down a little bit. And it can be medical. So I had one puppy that was really very intense biting, so would not stop. We had a 1.5 hour session, I think, and I tried to do all the calming things, and the parents tried to do all the calming things, and it didn't take long, and the puppy had ripped out a part of my ear because it was just out of control, and that puppy just had a stomach ache. So it was just the wrong food, and the puppy was feeling uncomfortable, and that's why the biting was so intense. They went to the vet, and they did a new diet, and it went away. So it can be a medical thing as well. If nothing else works, definitely get a medical check. Yeah, exactly. It happens when playing. Yeah. The playing is that thing that often gets too exciting. So try to see when it happens. So when does the puppy get too excited? How long did you play? What did you play? And all of that. So comment is Michael. Yeah, it kind of, yeah. It's a thing of the past. But if you haven't done this long enough, you kind of stay calm even if things go south really bad. But yeah. And another thing that sometimes happens with the play biting is when things are too exciting overall during the day, and then there is a play session, it can become too much a little bit faster. So, yeah. Try it out, and maybe you want to send me an email and tell me how it went. I would love to know. I'm really curious about these things. All right. Thank you so much for sticking with me, even though I took longer. Again, trying to shorten these things, but I'm kind of, well. All right. If you don't have any more questions, I will give you another minute, and then we will just wrap up and have an awesome Easter evening. All right. It seems to be it. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Jill, for being so active in the chat. You're very welcome. I can't wait to see how things go with your puppy. And yeah, have an awesome Easter weekend. And we'll see each other on YouTube. Bye.